Next up, Karen Ledger, registered nurse, psych background, and is going to discuss another different approach to healing, more on the energy medicine side, and EFT, or emotional freedom technique. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I'm talking about a very new and innovative technique that some of you may have heard about. How many have you heard of emotional freedom technique? Great. How many of you have actually tried it on yourselves? A few. Well, I thought since it's late in the day, we've all had a lot going on. I don't know about you, but my brain's so full, it's hard to kind of clarify. So I'm going to suggest that everybody stand up, because standing up gets our brains thinking. And I'm going to run you through, I hadn't planned this, but it just seems like a good idea, a partial run through an emotional freedom technique mechanism, and then I'll talk about it. So with EFT, we always want to start by stimulating the neurolymphatic system, either by rubbing a spot up here or by tapping on the side of your hand. So whatever you're more comfortable. And you could say, even though it's kind of late in the day and I'm a bit overloaded, or something like that, and I don't know how I'm going to remember all this, I accept myself. Even though I'm getting tired and I'm not sure I can be the top of my game, I love and accept myself. Even though maybe I've got a sore back or a sore butt from sitting all day, or my neck's a little tense or tight, I can accept that. And then now that's got our energy kind of flowing positively. And then we're going to start on the top of the head, and you can kind of focus on anything you want. But basically, I usually run through, this is looking silly. I'm not sure how this is going to help me. In fact, when I first learned this, I thought this was the weirdest thing. Just do monkey see, monkey do. This was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. And I said to the guy, you can't tell me that I can think about something I'm worried about, or my headache or my backache, and tapping on these points could actually make a difference. I mean, I just can't believe that's true. And in fact, he said, well, you're going to have to let me prove it to you then. So we worked on some things, some worries, you know, some tensions, some physical issues. And I noticed as I was tapping along that it didn't feel too bad. I mean, these are sort of places we tap and rub sometimes when we're stressed anyway. And it was feeling a little silly, but I thought, well, you know, at least I'll give it a try. I like this one. It feels like the monkey trick, right? And then some people use this spot and some people don't, but it's the liver spot, which is really good if you're frustrated or annoyed about anything. So I like this one. Okay. Now, there's quite a few more points we could be doing, but you can sit down now, and I think we've probably given you a little taste of what I make my patients do. But the good news is I always do it with them, so they don't feel so silly. So now, I don't have a mouse here, so I'm not sure how I'm supposed to click these. Oh, the keyboard. And I just press what? Return? Press down. Ah, it worked. Okay. I can't see this monitor over here. I don't know if that's feasible, but I'd sure love if I could not have to turn my neck around. That would be great. So I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to Roger for organizing this incredible day and for allowing anything as weird as emotional freedom technique to be on the day, because this is my absolute passion, this technique. Now, I've done, as you can see, 35 plus years of mental health work in a range of places, as well as community development and private practice. And I've always had a passion to empower people and to make a difference in the world. And I've also always been really interested in mind-body continuum and the mind-body-spirit continuum as I grow older. And for me, learning about energy psychotherapies, which is what EFT is, it's one of a number of energy psychotherapies, has brought all of that work together for the first time in my life. And so since first learning this very strange technique about 17 years ago, I've been working, trying to get this into institutions. And man, is that hard work. It's really, really hard to get people to take something so out of the box. And I'll tell you, for me, even me, who was kind of a granola type person, who was interested in alternative therapies, I just could not believe that something as simple and as odd as tapping on a bunch of acupuncture meridians could really help anybody. But when I saw a person in front of me with a 24-year flying phobia have it cleared in 45 minutes of therapy, that got my attention. When I saw a little kid who could not leave the connection with his family to go to something he really wanted to do in 20 minutes, able to go off to golf camp without anybody going with him. And his mother said his whole life changed after that short treatment. I paid attention. And when I've watched hundreds of students and clients change their lives, that got my attention. So when they told me after 10 or 12 years that we needed research to prove that this was actually as good as we were all seeing in our offices, I said, okay, how do I get some research done? And I actually went up and approached Tim Black. Where are you, Tim? At UVic, and said, hey, could you help a couple of us do a study on test anxiety in students? And so we ended up mobilizing ourselves and doing a study, which has now been published, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember which journal it's in, but if anybody wants to know, I've actually put sign-up pages for people who want information about research, events, etc. Just sign them up over there. We compared two energy psychotherapies, emotional freedom technique and HUI, which is a simplified version of a combination of EMDR and EFT, with cognitive behavioral therapy. And we got, the trouble with the study was that we only wanted to do two-hour group treatments, and the CBT therapist insisted they had to do 5 or 6 two-hour sessions. So trying to get students who are anxious about exams to give up 10 or 12 hours of their life was really hard to get people in the random controlled study, but we finally got enough to do a small study. And we found that we could reduce, and that the stats were amazing. We only had 5 students in each group. That's how hard it was to get students. But the test anxiety scores went like this for all 3 groups. But we got the results in 2 treatments of 2 hours. It took 5 sessions of CBT. Think about that in dollar costs. So that got my attention, and they all said, all these university students said, go do this for younger kids. You know, we need it sooner. We wish we'd had this when we were younger. So I did manage to get a school, did another study there. And then out came a documentary, a part of which I'm going to show you today, that made me realize there were a lot of people in our community suffering. And of course, being a kid who grew up in Victoria, some of my best friends were military kids. My first loves were military guys. I've had a lot of military people in my life, and I knew that we needed to help our service people. So I started reaching out to this military community. So let me see what I want to say now. So the purpose of my presentation today is to move and inspire consumers, that's you people that have got the trouble, and the decision makers, that's some of you folks sitting here in this room, to view energy psychotherapies, which EFT is one of, as really powerful treatment methods to be used in conjunction with standard mental health care for our troops. So one of the films that I put out, the documentary that inspired me, had the unfortunate title of Operational Emotional Freedom, The Answer. And that upset a lot of people, and it upset me, because it's not the answer, it's part of the answer. So I want to make sure when you get my little flyers, which are around, I'm showing that full documentary in a couple of weeks locally, that I don't believe this is the answer, but I believe it's a very powerful answer, and we need to get it out there. So the goal is to stimulate conversation and commitments by decision makers to mount comparative studies of EFT for the treatment of PTSD for our soldiers, military personnel. And even more importantly, offering EFT training to our troops before they're deployed, because this is a self-care modality. It's one of the really exciting things about EFT. All you need is your hands and your trouble. That's all you need, anytime, any minute, anytime a trigger is coming at you. And our military people don't all have PTSD. Do they have phobias? Do they have anxieties? Do they have grief? Do they have trouble dealing with their kids or their spouses or their seniors or etc.? We've all got trouble. I use this stuff every day of my life. I've been busy kind of tapping away on myself to make sure I'm feeling grounded and my brain is coherent, because absolutely we want a coherent brain, and we've learned that EFT actually increases coherence. And I don't think I've got the slide, but when they did a digitized EEG comparison of before, they had generalized anxiety clients, and they measured them over 12 sessions, carried over 4 weeks. And the change in brain function from almost total shutdown of the frontal and parietal lobes to full coherence, or moving towards full coherence, which continued on after the treatment. So this is really, really important. That was a study done in South America at 5 allied health clinics. So what else did I say there? Oh yes, train the mental health staff so that they can actually deliver this therapy as part of their mental health care. Because this doesn't just eliminate PTSD, it eliminates anxiety, depression, pain, fears, phobias. Lots of people have phobias after coming back from missions, phobias of heat. And somebody just told me last night about one of their colleagues who will not walk on grass because grass means explosive devices. And he refuses to walk on grass now, trying to live in our country, our beautiful country. Many, many things we can be treating. Okay, so what is emotional freedom technique? Well, it's one of a group of energy psychotherapies, which started with a therapy called thought field therapy. Some of you may have heard of that. That work with the interface of our thoughts, emotions, and body symptoms. So we're using all the different parts of the brain, the reptilian brain, the symptoms, the mammalian brain, and the neocortex. And we interface those with the acupuncture meridians. We've been studying for a long time what is it about that combination that seems to have such a dramatic and powerful effect that in one session I can get rid of somebody's 24-year flying phobia. Well, apparently, the research done I just learned this yesterday, so I'm really excited to be able to say this. Harvard Medical School has been doing research on what happens when you stimulate acupuncture points. And what they found is that they interrupt the fear information passing through the limbic, neocortex, and amygdala areas. I know, Athol, you'd know more about the details about that, but they've done a lot of brain mapping to show what happens. So we finally now actually have a scientific explanation of why this kind of thing could possibly work. So we know that memories are stored as constellations of electrical impulses in the brain. And we also know that many people with PTSD are triggered by something as small as, or what's seemingly small, as a smell. A gentleman last night was telling me he went to the movies and he smelled popcorn. And the smell of that popcorn took him back 42 years to a burning boat where many of his colleagues died. And he had to almost had to leave the theater. It was that fast, flashed him back. So when we treat people with EFT, we can have them just touch on any one aspect of a memory very gently from a distance, and it will activate the constellation. So once we've activated the constellation, then we call that tuning in to the issue. We get them to rate it out of 10. So right now, when you tune into this issue, how big is it feeling? 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10. If 10's the worst and 0's none. Now, because they're getting symptoms, we don't want them to suffer, so we immediately start having them do that rubbing of the area and saying, I accept myself, even though I'm getting this fear and anxiety when I think about the bombing. Okay? And just saying that, often they'll sigh. You can start to see the physiology changing just even as they're doing this maneuver. So any of you that are triggered, even if you know to just even stimulate the side of your hand, if you've got a trigger of something happening, You just tap on this spot here. If you don't want to be really, visible, you can just tap here. And say, and think to yourself, even though I'm worried I'm going to get triggered by this, I accept myself. I'm here and now, and I'm okay, even though I'm feeling triggered. And that can help to settle down the energy system. Okay? So once we've done that, we then commence to tap on or touch a series of acupuncture points on the body. Now, there's many, many, many meridians on the body, and that's why you don't have to be too accurate necessarily about where you're tapping. But when this was developed by Gary Craig, this particular technique, he said, if we just tap the 14 main meridians on the body, we'll know we've covered all the systems that we need to. And then we've added the top of the head because that's part of the governing vessel, which goes down the back of your body. And we've added this one, which is the top of the frontal governing body, I think it's called. And I don't pay attention to the names. All I know is these work. So then we just have them keep repeating. Now, I'm a ranter, right? So they used to just go, oh, this fear of grass, this fear of grass, this fear of grass. But I would be going, this fear of grass, because there might be an IUD there. I could die if I stepped on grass. I'm so afraid of grass, I never want to see another blade of grass. It reminds me of all my buddies that were blown up in that IED event. And I don't know if I could ever get over it. And I just have the person rant, okay? So what's that? The ranting is activating all the places in the brain and all the things that that person has not wanted to think or talk about. We're actually embracing all of that. We're bringing it in. We're activating as many corners of the brain as we can in order to tie that in to the calming response that's happening physiologically by stimulating these points. Okay. Now, often PTSD occurs when core values or core beliefs are compromised, as many people talked about today. So we have to look not only at the present moment, which is ramp ceremonies. How many people are triggered by ramp ceremonies? How many people are triggered by memories of colleagues who've died, or the fear of dying? So we've got these events. But they often have to do with compromising sense of safety or worthiness or lovability. Now, many people in the military started out in cadets. How many of you guys have been in cadets? Anybody? So from an early age, look at this guy. He's a winner. He can conquer anything. Look at all these. He's got this award here. He's proud. He's confident. He knows he can take on the world. Now, maybe as a little kid, he watched Superman, and he might have played at being Superman. And when you're a young kid in the military, you can feel like Superman. You've got the uniform, and everybody's respecting you, and it feels really good. The trouble is, most of our childhoods, we didn't feel like Superman, and we didn't feel super confident. And in fact, sometimes we felt downright unsafe, unworthy, uncared about, and kind of lonely and isolated. So what happens when our service people come home from serving? There's a sense often of sadness and betrayal, rage, what they've been sent to do and how it really didn't seem to help, or how helpless they felt about what they were trying to do, a sense of impotence and hopelessness, and all the things that little child felt. So we've now not only triggered all the present day stuff, but it's going deep, deep down into the roots. And so part of the care of our military people is to look at exactly what a number of you talked about, which is everybody has their own experience. Everybody comes with a different package of who they are and what it is to be valued, loved, or safe, depending on the experiences of childhood. So in my experience and the experience of many of my colleagues working with PTSD, we have to go back to talk to the child. So when I do the setup for EFT now, I always say, even though I'm feeling this fear and rage and betrayal, I'm lovable and I'm okay. Because that's what every little kid wants to feel. And so for the kid part of us, I always add that in. That's not part of the normal protocol, but it's so important because every one of us has a child inside that wants to feel lovable and okay. And it's really hard for some people to say I love and accept myself or I'm lovable and okay. But usually the lovable and okay one, they'll smile. Now, some people don't like those phrases, so I've had a young guy who said, I'm not going to say that, it's stupid. I just want to say, I'm the man. If that makes him feel good and alive, I'm the man is the statement he can make. One of my military guys said, we can do it. Even though I'm feeling blah, 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 we can do it. Because for him, it was about we. As Tim was saying, you guys bond, you see yourselves as a group, and it's about we can do it. So one of the other problems that we see for people with these PTSD troubles is they're medicated, highly medicated sometimes. Dozens of medications, all layering over top of one another. And then these medications bring more trouble. They bring kind of a numbness. They bring a sense of dulled mental faculties and slowed responses and sometimes sexual dysfunction. So here's a person who felt impotent in the field because he couldn't do what he was there to do. And then he comes home and he can't even express his sexuality in the way he would like to. It's really compromising. So the more we can get people off their medications so that they can start feeling more alive again, the better. And the nice thing about EFT is you don't have to be off medications to still get benefit. And that's really important when you're dealing with so many things. So what I love about EFT is it can be used anytime. There's no equipment needed, just your hands. In fact, even if you couldn't use your hands, once you've stimulated these areas enough, you can actually remember the feeling of stimulating those points. And there's a saying in Chinese medicine, where thought goes, energy flows. So if I'm having trouble going to sleep at night, I'll lie there in bed and say, oh, even though I feel like I'm going to be a basket case in the morning and I wish my brain had stopped and I'm so worried I'm not going to be able to sleep, I accept myself. And then I imagine tapping on the points, and I'm usually asleep within no time. So it's really useful for all kinds of things. There's no cost for self-care. And one of the things that my clients tell me over and over again is, as soon as I knew that this helped me, my panic attacks didn't seem so bad. Because if I thought I was going to go into a panic attack, I could stop it immediately. I didn't have to have the drug or whatever, right? It was really, really valuable. The other thing is that it enhances our well-being, and it enhances our capacity to think clearly, because mental coherence means our brain's working better. Okay, now I need to know how far I am into, I should go back for a sec. I want to acknowledge David Feinstein, who is a PhD psychologist who's been studying a lot and collating all the research in energy psychotherapies. He's found 49 studies, peer-reviewed, published studies. I've given a copy to Juan, and I'll get them to anybody else that's interested. He's just got a paper in progress of being published right now, but it's exciting. We've got some studies, not all on PTSD, but on the efficacy of EFT. Many of them comparative, and many of them showing much higher success rates than for any other therapy they're compared to. So this is some of his slides. So he found these 49 peer-reviewed studies, and they all demonstrated energy psychotherapies as effective in treating a range of mental health issues, including PTSD. So here's one that was 59 veterans. Now, I have to tell you, somebody talked about teleconferences. Most of these veterans actually were treated, or at least half of them were treated by Skype or telephone by volunteer therapists around the United States. They did before treatment measures. The average PTSD score was 61.4. 50 is the cutoff for military PTSD. So most of these people were severe PTSD that were in this study. The average after treatment was 34.6, well below clinical levels. The waitlist control group was 66.6 before and 65.3 after. No change in the 6 weeks that it took for these other folks to drop down to half, virtually half. Another study comparing a number of CBT and EFT studies. 6 sessions of EFT on 49 veterans. Before treatment, 100% had clinical PTSD. After treatment, only 14%. And 0% had no improvement. Everybody improved, and all but 14% were below clinical levels. For the CBT, 100% had it before, after treatment, 60% still had it, and 50% had no benefit from the CBT. Now, given that CBT is considered best practice PTSD, I think we really need to look at those kind of numbers. Now, do we need more studies? Absolutely, and there are more studies than this, but I'd sure like to see us doing some. This is just hot off the press. Dawson Church, who's a psychologist who's engineered a lot of the military PTSD, went and measured at a place called Angel Fire retreat, and they do 5-day retreats in a beautiful setting in the mountains where they go horseback riding, learn meditation, yoga, massage, and they added EFT to their protocol. And this is the mean measures of both veterans and their spouses who had PTSD, 6 different groups. So the lines are all different groups, all got dramatic shifts in PTSD over the 5-day period and into follow-up. And I don't have a lot of more details on that here, but if anybody wants that study, I can let you know about it when as soon as it's published. This was one of the studies that got me wanting to do something here, and that is 11 subjects treated in a 5-day intensive by skilled EFT therapists, and I'm going to show you a clip from the documentary about that. This is the PTSD scores before treatment, and then after treatment in 3, 6, and 9 months, or 3, 6, and maybe a year. Read it from here. After. So dropped a bit, dropped dramatically, raised a tiny bit, I think it's about 7 points. And the green line is that on the PTSD military assessment scale, you can't get less than 17 on the scale. So if you took the green out, you can see how far those scores dropped in that study. This was a change in overall severity and breadth of psychological distress. Again, you can see dramatic drops. So these did a 30-day pre-measure, a right before treatment measure, and then after the final treatment. You can see drops there. Now, I don't know if there was any follow-up on these folks. So what I wanted to do now was, whoops, what is that there for? Really know what that says. No? Where do I find no? Oh, go to the right. Okay, just in case I lose this. So this documentary, Operational Emotional Freedom, which I'm going to say is part of the answer, this is a trailer you can view online at veteransstressproject.org. But I wanted to show it here because I think these men and women tell the story better than I do.
That tired to work on King when he got home.
Sorry.
That he killed himself down on Myrtle Beach one weekend because he couldn't take he couldn't take that.
Well, I enjoyed your talk very much.
I know eventually I have to because I'm going to destroy it or it's going to destroy me.
tried everything. Medications from doctors, which I don't want to be on, I want to be natural. And I've tried talking about my problems, but it's just, all it does is bring them back up, and I think about them at night.
The dichotomy is so great between what I was when I went in and what I became after I got out, that it's a very, very messy situation inside of my head a lot of times.
With EFT, we are targeting the acupuncture meridians. And the meridians, as you know, are these non-physical pathways that run longitudinally in the body. And one way that I think of the acupuncture points is that they are portals or entryways, not just into our emotional reality, but into our energetic reality. And so if you want to affect people deeply, we need to touch them, so to speak, on an energetic level.
When human beings are under stress, they naturally rub or touch or tap parts of their bodies. So we found that if we tap or rub or touch these points in sequence, and there are about 14 of them on the body, that it has a remarkable effect in reducing our stress. What we first do is we pair our memory of a traumatic incident with a positive statement of self-acceptance.
And the shock of that.
The shock of that,
But I'm still here.
but I'm still here,
And I love and accept myself.
and love and accept myself.
While you're saying that, you then rub or tap or touch each of these points in sequence, and it's quite amazing to watch people because their emotional charge around that negative memory just deflates like a balloon.
What I wanted to do was sort of kill two birds with one stone. I wanted to get some vets here. I wanted to really help them. I wanted to show everybody what we could do with this process so that the public will start pushing the VA and pushing the therapy fields and pushing the hospitals and so on to use this non-invasive, easy-to-use, astonishingly successful technique. I purposely invited two doctors, one a psychologist, one a psychiatrist.
I'd seen the 5 days at the VA video and found it enlightening. I also, in a very selfish way, thought, my God, I'll be exposed to some of the premier EFTers in the world, and I can watch and learn something here.
Actually, I heard that Gary was going to be working with vets and contacted him because I was interested in that population.
I married just before we went. And I'm pretty sure it was King who went back to the deuce and a half, and you had to crawl, you know, up there. And when that pile went off, it cut his fucking legs right off.
Why do you think that's true? That you shouldn't be having feelings about it?
Because you drive on, airborne drive on, right?
Okay. Can I do a little bit on that? Even though I have to be perfect.
Even though I have to be perfect.
And I can't show my feelings.
I can't show my feelings.
What am I doing showing my feelings?
What am I doing showing my feelings?
I gotta drive on.
I have to drive on.
No wonder I feel vulnerable.
No wonder I feel vulnerable.
No wonder I have this tightness in my body.
No wonder I have this tightness in my body.
No wonder I feel exposed.
No wonder I feel exposed.
And many of them had other kinds of traumas that cover the whole spectrum of life, from early childhood through recent time.
In Andy's case, just the way he presented himself, you know, he told us that when he was a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, that this was the time when his soul left the body.
He talked about the fact that his father was very domineering, not loving at all. In fact, he called him Jack, not Dad.
In the room, I felt as if my father was there, and Ingrid kind of got up and went over to him and just took my childhood and my power as a person away from him, as if he was sitting right there, and handed them to me in just that one session.
Andy is very hypervigilant. He always knows where people are in a restaurant. He was aware at all times of the ladies talking in the booth behind him. He was aware of the people behind me. But as we had this lunch, and as we started tapping on various issues, it got better and better.
That we were able to sit there in a restaurant, and I enjoyed the meal.
If we were to go back to some other restaurant, would you have the same hesitancy? Estimate in percentage terms. I'd have 20% less?
No, I'd say 50% less. I haven't felt this good doing cocaine. I haven't felt this good drinking. I just hope the people would just try it once.
I'm terrified of heights. I won't not climb a ladder, even things at work that I wouldn't do. I am terrified of heights. So he had set up to go over to the Embassy Hotel, and we got there. And when we got on the glass elevator, I turned my back to the door, so I wouldn't have to look out. To some people it may sound funny and stuff. How could it be? But even though we were only like 5 stories up, I mean, I was shaking.
It took us, 10 or 15 minutes of going back and forth.
We tapped through, each one of them.
Until finally he gets there and he looks over and he says, I'm holding on here fairly tight, but I'm about 95% done with this. That actually set up the ability for us to work on one of his more intense memories, one that he calls his behind his personal wall.
And we took a direct hit, and it pretty much destroyed most of the hospital. There was nothing but blood and body parts, and I can smell it, I can taste it, and I can see it. We were trying to pull people out, and I pulled somebody out from underneath the rubble, and all I pulled out was half of them. And you go for somebody else and you hear somebody screaming and the place is dark and you were picking up parts. I can see it like it was here, like, it's in front of me. And I've had flashbacks about them. And I never want to go back there. I wake up, like now I'm sweating. I am fucking sweating. Right,
stay with me. Just stay with me.
It's just...
Okay, just stay with me. Just be quiet.
I feel like I'll throw up.
You what?
I'll throw up.
He came back, his face was ashen and everything, and we just kept tapping on it. What other pieces of this memory are showing up? A sight, a sound, what?
Mostly the body parts and the blood and the smell. I can feel it, you can see it.
Okay, all right, here. Even though I have this blood in these body parts.
Even though I have these bloods and body parts.
In my mind.
In my mind.
In my memory.
In my memory.
It's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago.
It's not really here right now.
It's not really here with me.
The next day we collapsed it still further and further and further till he would just talk about it like it was nothing.
We just started pulling bodies out.
And how many bodies were there?
I think all total there was 15 killed. It's amazing how I feel right now. I can actually talk about it calmly.
I would say that I've never seen anything that can start with a symptom of very high anxiety, of insomnia, of hyperarousal, and have that disappear in the course of a few days' time. That's extraordinary.
And I mean this sincerely, especially, talking to, brother vets and veterans. If you want to try EFT, I'm sure there's a way that they'll let you know about it and give it a shot, because I'm living proof of this, so hang in there.
There was an Iraqi, he had a machine gun as well, firing at me, and his weapon jammed. Then I got the first shot off. That was the first time I ever killed anyone. And I never wanted to ever harm anyone or ever have to go through that situation.
Carlin couldn't see a future for himself. He couldn't get past being stuck of where he was because of the nightmares and he just couldn't go there.
Carlin, when he showed up that first night, was very tense, very skeptical. He was, by his own terms, drinking himself to sleep every night because his nightmares would get to him so badly.
It's amazing what I was doing with alcohol. Like some people would do with like deep drugs.
Yes.
It was like I'd wake up and drink, and I'd drink the entire day.
And the lack of hope has sent him into, I can't do this life. You know, I'm gonna go back. I have to go back. I have to re-enlist. That's all I know. That's all I know how to do.
There are people bringing up stuff they've never talked or exposed to anybody else. They are touching affect that's like the atomic bombs of their mind.
There was a small child walking up to the post, and he just blew up. He blew up, and you know, arms and legs went everywhere.
Okay. How do you feel when you tell me that?
Pretty sick.
I don't know where I'd be if I wasn't able to tap on myself hearing what this young man has had to put up with.
Because hearing the women screaming and the girls, like the children screaming with them and looking at us like, you know, y'all are here, y'all are the reason why my child's dead.
Okay. And then helping him take piece by piece, unpack it, and dilute it. And so that was exhilarating because within a day, he's not smoking. He doesn't care about the drinking. And I said to him, well, because we've taken care of what you needed to completely obliterate with alcohol and cigarettes. What would you say?
Say the screaming of the women and children, 0.
Zero.
It's gone.
Good. So are they all 0?
Yes.
Brains?
I don't feel guilty for...
No guilt. Okay. Brains splattered all over the floor.
0.
Blood everywhere.
0.
Body parts all over you.
0.
Okay. And it's my fault.
0.
Great. So no nightmares?
No nightmares. Woke up feeling good.
Great. How is your jaw today?
I don't feel any pain.
And the neck that is usually, I know, from the jaw?
Right.
Is that
It's
okay?
0. Yeah.
Okay. How are your hands?
It's better than yesterday.
That is much better. I can see that.
Yeah.
That's the tremor.
Before I did the EFT thing, for me to say, I'm happy, that would just be weird for me to say, just to say out loud to myself. And I say it probably like 10 times a day now.
And I saw this lieutenant trying to move, and I tried to get to the helicopter and grab his foot to see if I couldn't pull him out. But the flames were just too high. It just burned and basically blew up, and we sent back the 3 body bags.
I had chosen to leave my husband because he was getting very, almost like a lot of violence. He was threatening to shoot the children and me on a consistent basis.
Because of the PTSD?
Yes. We all lie to you because we're afraid of you, not because we want to lie to you or because we hate you. We love you, but if we tell you the truth, you get angry about situations, very angry.
A person comes back with PTSD and it can destroy the family. You have a person now who is not sleeping, who becomes abusive, who becomes addicted to drugs and alcohol. So you have families torn apart.
Maybe it's been too many years. Maybe it's been too long a time. Maybe I've wreaked too much havoc inside of my life and that of my children, my wife, and everybody else around me.
He's a veteran and he has had all the symptoms and we've been in the psych ward for years. I've had therapy, and in 3 days we're talking. And we haven't talked in 5 years, really talked and had a conversation. These men should have their families supporting them on a consistent basis for many years. They shouldn't lose their wives, they shouldn't lose their children because they serve this country.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you can actually feel like a real person again and not be afraid and not have to cover up all of your junk every single day of your life.
But when you're doing something new that people don't have a frame of reference for, you have a higher burden of proof. And I think, in fairness to the public, you should have a higher burden of proof.
While Gary Craig was working with the veterans you're seeing on this video, I was also gathering data on their psychological and mental conditions. Their scores on standard measures of PTSD used by the military was 63% between before the event and after that week of treatment. Their scores for anxiety and depression dropped by more than half, and when we retested them at points in the future, they'd held most of those gains.
While we say clinically, look, what we notice is I'm sitting with my client who's got a traumatic issue going on, and the client, I'll call it downregulates, returns to center, calms. That's observable, it's obvious. But if you can show that there's an immediate cortisol change, and cortisol is a chemical that's being used to measure stress response, then you're not just saying it's an observation, which maybe we could argue about, did that happen or not, but we can say it's that plus there was a physiological change.
We looked at people's cortisol levels before and after 1 hour of treatment with either EFT or regular psychotherapy or no treatment at all. We discovered that with EFT, people's cortisol levels drop by an average of 25% in a single hour.
People like me, who were very, very skeptical about energy psychology methods in the beginning, have become very, very enthusiastic about them because of one thing and one thing only. It's called results.
It is my conviction that EFT should be in every VA center in the country. But they're just not able to do this job for the vets with conventional stuff.
But we've got the most incredible, powerful healing tool that this planet has ever seen, and we need to get it to the people who need it.
On this website, if you click on the Find Help button, you will find lists of therapists both inside the VA system and also in private outpatient clinics that treat veterans with PTSD. Most of these therapists will treat people at low cost or no cost. They'll also treat the families of PTSD veterans, because living with someone with PTSD can be very, very difficult.
These energy psychology methods in general, EFT in specific, are uncanny in their ability to produce results really rapidly.
I don't know any place anywhere that would take on this group of folks with all of these challenges, and yet we were able to help. I can't think of a single person we didn't help materially.